Welcome to the Manufacturing Masters Podcast with your host, Allison DeFord.
Hello, everyone. Today's episode is coming to you live from Alaska. Okay, only one of us is in Alaska, and that is our amazing guest, Phil Ranck. He is the founder and master black belt and lead trainer at a company called Lean Alaska. He is so good at helping manufacturers with process improvement. I can't even begin to tell you. He breaks it down, he clarifies, and he really is so good at uniting teams and getting them through change easily and efficiently, and has really brought a whole new level of understanding to my world around this topic. He's also an adjunct professor at the University of Alaska, Anchorage, and he served our country in the U.S. Army for 24 years. He is a logistics specialist. And let me tell you what, he's going to enlighten you today on probably the most important part of process improvement. Where do you get the solutions to make things more efficient? He's going to tell you. And second, he is going to help you stop wasting time having meetings about meetings. He's going to help you create a more impactful daily stand-up. And let's jump into that, because I know you're going to want to take some notes, first of all, and you're going to want to reach out to Phil after this and probably ask him some questions, because everybody, Phil gives me brain burn, but in the best of ways. Let's jump in. Everybody, here we grow. Today, we are coming to you live from Alaska. Well, one of us is in Alaska. Hey, Phil, how is it going there? Looks beautiful.
It does. Beautifully cold. Beautiful cold. I think we can go with that. Yeah, it's about 20-ish out. So, enjoying the warm winter.
Yes. Yeah. And you did say it's unseasonably warm for this time of year.
Warm. Yes, it is. Yeah. Usually there's snow on the ground. It's interesting. We've lived here for 7 or 8 years now. We've never had a Halloween where there was still grass. So it was very, it may seem very odd, but yeah, we actually got to Halloween like we used to when we used to live in the lower 48. So interesting experience this year.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so excited to have you back. You were on the other podcast, MFG Out Loud, with Ray and I, and we were so impressed with you that we recommended you to be an expert on the Manufacturing Masters platform, which you are. And I want to just encourage everybody listening to, if they're not already subscribed, please do that. And just Phil's videos alone are worth the subscription price, because you're going to learn so much. The last time we interviewed you, when we were done, I felt like I had brain burn. And I mean that in as a compliment, because you are so smart and so good at explaining process improvement. You are a master at Lean and Sigma 6 and all things having to do with that. And I must mention and thank you for your service. You were in the Army for 24 years and mastered, I think, a lot of these skills there. Is that right?
I did. It's actually how I got into process improvement. My specialty was logistics, primarily automotive maintenance and supply chain. And with the military, there's so many different requirements that as I was growing up through my time, I kept seeing the need for a better process. There's got to be a better way to do this more effectively. And that's how I got introduced to Lean Six Sigma. So I spent a better half of that 24 years bringing process improvement to the military. And so it became a very natural transition for me afterwards, and yeah, and smart, I don't know if I'm smart most days. I think I kind of hedge more on experience. It's just I've done it so many times. We'll go with experience.
Yeah, well, I'm going to beg to differ. And of course, I called Six Sigma. I had to throw in the wrong name so that you could correct everybody because I apologize for that. It's one of those days.
Every day is a Monday till Saturday.
I'll tell you. You posted something that I wanted to share on LinkedIn. You posted it, I think it was today or sometime this week. And you posed a question that you get all the time. Now, you, with Lean Alaska, you teach and instruct, and like you are the go-to, in my opinion, for helping, especially small businesses, to improve their processes, right? And even if they're a startup, helping them initiate good practices. And the question that you say you get a lot is, where do the ideas come from to improve the process? And your response was awesome. You said from the team. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that, because I know you get this question a lot. Explain what that means and how manufacturers listening, that they can really tune into this and really tune into their team.
Absolutely. I love that question because it is something that we don't talk about very often, is where does the answers come from? And I get that question not only from those that I consult with, but primarily from those that I train. So, and I do, I focus very heavily with small businesses and startups. I find a lot of companies, they never seem to have the resources. And then the best time for them to have process improvements is startups. That is very much my focus. And I bring that consulting back to my training classroom. So every single iteration that I teach is different because I'm bringing something back. And one of them is the answer to this question. And the students ask it, because we go through a very structured learning, right? I mean, the tools are not new. Brainstorming is not new. Math is not new. It's been around for a couple of days. We just add structure and link these things together in this very linear path for development. And as you're going through it, the hard tools are all there. It's very simple. How do you calculate process cycle efficiency? Well, here's the formula. How do you do a hypothesis test? Well, here's how you use Minitab. And then we get into this brainstorming event. So everybody, when they get to the point of solution development, they're like, okay, where's the magic tool that kicks me out a formula that tells me how to fix what I'm doing in my process? And what we tell them is there is no magic formula. There's no magic book, because every single organization is different. Even if I make tires and you make tires, we're going to make them differently. So there's no singular solution to that. So they keep asking, where do the good ideas come from? Because I was discussing with the class the one day that made me post that, how we took a straight rubber line for a can filling machine and turned it into a helix coil and compressed it by 2.5 feet to save space. And they're like, where does that come from? And I was like, well, I'm telling you right now, it doesn't come from me. Like I said, experience, not smarts. However, when you do things with a team, your team is the one experiencing the problem that you started this journey with. Now they've been there with you for identification and define. They've been there with you for baselining. They've been there for you for root cause. Who better to ask what could be a possible solution? Goes back to Einstein's quote. If I had 55 minutes to solve, or an hour to solve the world's problems, I would spend 55 minutes on the question. It's the same premise. So I tell everybody, it's the team. When you need an answer, go to the team that's doing the process that you've been working with to identify all of the issues. They're going to have the largest pool of input. And then when you collect that information from the team, now your process improvement specialist can go back and reduce the model and do the process improvement stuff we do, solution selection, review boards. But ideas come from people. And who better to ask than the people that are experiencing the issue, have been there to identify the root cause. It's just natural to get to the team for solution development. So it's not just one or two guys sitting in a room or, somebody flipping through a manual and like, oh, there it is on page 53. That doesn't exist.
Wouldn't that be nice?
It really would. It would make it a lot easier to teach.
Well, do you find that, let's say you're working with an existing company, and do you find frequently that instead of turning to the team, they try to solve it on their own, or they bring in a consultant instead of looking inward?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the first things that I tell organizations when I work with them, as a consultant, I tell them, I'm not the answer to your questions. I'm not the answer to you being better at making granola. Like, oddly enough, the largest group that I work with is food manufacturers. I burn water Like cold cereal is a challenge on most days for me. I cannot tell you how to make your food product better, but what I can tell you is how to make the process of making your food product better. Right. So I tell them up front, I don't have the answer, but I know how to get your team to the answer. I know somebody asked me one time, they're like, what's so special about a master black belt? And I tell them the same thing every time. It's nothing. There's nothing special about us. We just know how to ask the right question at the right time to the right people. And by doing that, it unlocks the potential within organizations that most manufacturers don't realize that they have. And it's really part of our downtime, right? The 8 waste is non-utilized talent. Well, the techniques that we bring to the table are how do you unlock that potential that you're unaware of that's there? Because there are organizations, they identify a problem, they immediately get to a solution, or they want to get to a solution. And that's where we tell them we have to deviate to a root cause. And it seems like when you slow them down to the root cause, they understand more to slow down to the solution. But yeah, we find a lot of times, or what you'll find is a lot of apprehension, where the team will look to the leadership and say, okay, we found the problem, you find the answer. And it's unnatural for them to say, hey, we found the problem and here are some answers, select which one you like. But a lot of that comes from the military. We do that in the military. We go to the boss and we say, here's the problem and here are 3 COAs or courses of action. Status quo, the one we like, and the crazy idea that's on the table. That's why we process improvement, because it's the same concept. Here's the root cause. Here are potential solutions to your root cause. This is what we all agree. Any of these ones would be acceptable to us as a team. What makes sense from the strategic perspective of the organization? What aligns with the KPIs? And it's a conversation. It's not a directive. So we do see that they turn to the leadership a lot, but that's a lot of what the training is to get them to kind of out of that comfort zone and realize this different perspective of identifying the solution.
This is making me think a lot about when you go to the doctor, because I feel like you are a specialist. Mm-hmm. And when you go to the doctor and there are 2 kinds of doctors in my mind, and I'm just generalizing here, but you've got the generalist and the specialist. So let's just say for shits and giggles, you go to the generalist and they're really good at listening to what the symptoms are, whipping off a script and saying, here you go, you should be fine in 3 to 5 days. Then you've got the specialist, and this is where I see your role is the root cause. Like you've said that a couple times, and I think it's very important to look beneath, right? Look beyond, like they say in the movie Hidden Figures, which I love. Look beyond. The numbers don't lie. And I think, would you say that a lot of manufacturers maybe lean towards or default towards that generalist approach, right? Where we've got this problem, let's solve it. And you're like, hold up, let's slow down before we speed up and let's dig a little deeper, because if we can fix the root problem, right, there's probably going to be a different COA or course of action. I'm going to use that, by the way. I love that. Than we would have used. And it's going to work better long-term to actually solve the problem. Like, am I getting it?
And 5Y is a very useful technique for root cause. And especially when we're consulting, we don't come in and say, all right, we're going to use this technique called 5Y, and we don't set the stage for it. We just jump right into the conversation. They're not even sure. They probably feel like they're talking to their toddler or their child, because I keep asking them, well, why is that? Why is that? Where they get frustrated, getting down to that root. And what I try to explain to them is this succession of questions, not 5 questions about your problem, but continuous causes, right? The causal chain of effect that we're dealing with here. They keep going down that list, and then they keep having aha moments at each level. And what we kind of explain to them is the reason we want to get down to this root cause is because if I just solve for a symptom, I'm only solving for a symptom, and that's only valid while the person that I've solved the symptom for is in the position. I didn't change my process. 5Y follows this link, right? You have 3 different areas of root cause. You have the physical cause, the human cause, and the organizational cause. Well, we so often get focused on the human cause that we don't look to the organization, and that's where 5Y brings you. And what we explain to them is when you get to the organizational cause, you have the possibility of actually solving 4 or 5 symptoms at the same time. Whereas if you just focus on a symptom, you're only solving the symptom. But there's that kind of, well, why do you keep asking me this question? Well, why do you keep doing this process the wrong way? It's a very colorful conversation, but yeah.
Well, they're not paying you. Like, you're not, I tell clients this sometimes, you're not paying me to be liked. Like, I'm not in this to be liked. I'm in this to probably irritate the shit out of you for just a little bit. And then you're going to end up loving, right? It's that little bit of friction, but because that's really what they're paying us for, I think, is that, it's that in-depth knowledge and experience, like you said, and your real skill is that you are able to dig deep. You are able to slow down the process just long enough to really help them see. And you're really helping. The results are so much bigger and are going to last so much longer. Like you said, if you just solve for the person, then let's say that person leaves. And I think this probably happens all the time.
Yeah. Fix the person and the person leaves, the poor process still exists. The only way to fix an organization is to fix the process. The people are what changes. The organization is what remains. And again, I take that from the military. I spent 24 years in the military. There is now a person in every position that I ever sat in. Everything I ever did in those seats is being done differently by somebody else, but amazingly enough, that organization is still moving forward. The people aren't the key. The process is the key, but the people define the process. So that's where that link has to be made. And it's asking the hard questions. And I tell people in the organization, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to ask you the hard questions. And the reason I'm here to ask the hard questions is, as an organization, especially a group of manufacturers, they want to be very tight-knit. They all want to be on the same team doing the same thing. You need that antagonist sometimes. You need to come in and ask, John, what's the hard question that he doesn't want to ask Sarah, and let Phil be the one to ask Sarah, because she can be mad at me. I'm going away.
Right.
But question on John's behalf. That's all part of the soft side of the skills when it comes to that root cause analysis and identifying, because there are hard questions that have to be asked. I had a very quick conversation with one of our clients just a couple of days ago, and we were discussing space for a manufacturer. And they said, getting ready to buy a building. I said, okay, how long is the building going to last you for growth? They said 1 to 3 years. I said, that's a lot of investment for 1 to 3 years. And I was like, why purchase as opposed to lease, as opposed to look to something else, going down the whys? And they're like, well, we don't want to have that conversation with the owner right now, so we're just kind of going with it. I was like, then let me have it. Because my guess is you're going, if you are the ones on the team running the production lines, you see what capacities you have in the space that we're doing. And if we're going to exceed that capacity in 3 years, you're going to blink and 3 years will be here. So that's where I come in, right? Ask the hard question to the boss, have you considered another option? So
I love that. Well, the other thing that, excuse me, one of your videos on the Manufacturing Masters podcast or platform that I absolutely love, and that's what I want to talk about on the tail end of talking about process improvement today, is maximizing your daily stand-ups. How many people listening, like whoever's listening, I want you to physically raise your hand if you have too many meetings, right? And you feel like, wow, that could have been done in an email. So you have some really, I think, good insight and tips on how to maximize that daily stand-up. And one quick thing I want to point out that you talk about, and I think this is very important. I've experienced it myself, so this really stood out to me because I have a small team. This is important, even if it's only 2 people on the team. Why? Because you're creating a structure and you're creating healthy practices for when you grow. So I would love it if you would share, how do we maximize our stand-up every day? And what's the point and how can we make the most of it?
There's so much to unpack there, and it's such a great, and I love that video. And honestly, I probably I need to write back in because a lot of those videos need to be updated because there's so much more out there now. But
Yeah.
I can. So two things come to mind. First is the small teams in the structure. Absolutely. Even a business, even if I've worked with a startup of one person before, and I tell them the same thing: have a startup talking to yourself in the mirror because your multiple personalities will talk back. It's a real. Ask why. Companies of 2 to 3 people, they're like, well, we'll get to that when we get enough people. And just in the video, every organization will say the same thing. If there's a poor process, why do you do that? Well, that's the way we've always done it. Well, the way we've always done it had to come from somewhere. So why not start off on the right foot as opposed to the waiting game? And now it's become a poor process that's embedded. It's much easier to set it up right than it is to fix it down the road, right? Think of mistake proofing, right? On how you implement things, or the cost of poor quality, any of those other techniques that we use. Doing something preventative is much easier to deal with than an internal or an external failure that we're seeing down the road. So even if it's 2 people, you have that daily stand-up, not because you're not aware of what's happening in the organization, but it sets structure. And then everybody that comes to the organization on day one, they see what you're doing. And you're not doing it for the first time. It becomes very comfortable. You're just adding. It's much easier, to build on a foundation than it is to create the foundation. Pouring concrete takes the longest, right?
Yep.
So that's why we team start in that structure. And to maximize those daily stand-ups, the reason it's called a stand-up is you're not supposed to be there long enough to sit down. And that's a very critical key. And that's why they're 15 minutes or less, depending. And it doesn't matter how large the group is. If you have too big of a group to have a stand-up in 15 minutes, you probably need to create successive groups, right? Smaller pockets that then maybe have some kind of a follow-up email or something to codify all the information given. And where I see a lot of those and maximizing those, that there are no questions. There are no questions in a daily stand-up. It is nothing but a simple briefing. I'm done, I'm stuck, right? Those are the 3 things we discuss from each person's perspective. This is what I've done yesterday towards our tasks or KPIs or, in our Kanban or whatever we're dealing with. This is what I'm doing today. And this is where I'm stuck. And where I'm stuck is what generates conversations. But what we need to understand is I'm stuck means I can't solve it on my own, or my team can't solve it on our own. We require an elevated level of support. That's the I'm stuck we're looking for. If I can solve it with my team, it's not an I'm stuck for the group. It's an I'm stuck for, the process owner that's there, or the stakeholder that's there, or whoever's, listening in on this conversation. But it's no questions. Questions are for afterwards. I'm done, I'm stuck. And it moves on to the next person. We kind of skip past those, because what will happen, you'll see in a lot of stand-ups is, as soon as you get to the I'm stuck, everybody tries to solve, just like you mentioned earlier. Well, even in the daily stand-up, if you're trying to solve during the stand-up, you've completely skipped identification, measure, baseline, root cause, all of the other things process improvement does, yet you're using a process improvement tool. So remember, we're just identifying. Once we leave that meeting, that's where, now, you may not ask questions, but we can kind of pin the tail, if you will. Oh, you know what? I'll help you with this. After the stand-up is over, go talk to Phil. The other 5 people don't need to hear this. It's not relevant. So we continuously make them fast. And the other reason we want to make them fast is to maximize that time. If you think back again, we'll go back to math and calculations, process cycle efficiency. It's the calculation of value added in the process. Us having a daily stand-up is not value added to our customers. So even though it's extremely valuable to us as a business, a value added process cycle, if something's value added, the customer is paying. If it's non-value added, the business is paying. You're paying for that 15 minutes. You only want to pay for 15 minutes to get back to doing something where customers are paying in terms of manufacturing, the production, what you're good at. But we need that stand-up, right, to set the tone for the day, set the baseline, identify the issues, solve them throughout, where we're not continuously compounding non-value added time through discussion. That is complex to everybody else, but the 2 people talking.
Oh, fantastic. Well, so repeat for everybody listening the 3 things you come to the stand-up with.
Absolutely. I'm done. I'm doing.
I'm stuck.
You can put that on a piece. Have a little. I've even worked with the companies where their OCD really kicks in, and they make little, like, index size laminated cards that say just that. So each day before they come, this is what I have done yesterday, aligned with what my responsibilities are in the organization. This is what I'm doing today to move towards my other goals in the organization. And then I'm stuck, meaning I need an elevated level of support, not internal. Write it down at the end. I'm done. I'm stuck.
And from your experience, do you find that it's more, and this may not be a question you can answer, do you find that it's more management that has a problem shifting to that, or employees and the team?
It's a little bit of both. When you first start putting that into an organization, especially one that's already established, the employees don't see sometimes the utility in it, right? And it's just another meeting to them, and it doesn't lead to anything. It doesn't lend to anything. So they view it as non-value added, as a waste of their time, because they haven't seen the output come from it. Leadership sometimes has an issue with it. And from my experience, for a few different reasons. One, their schedule's chaotic. They can't fit it in, right? They're all have a very unique pattern. Well, we can all fit 15 minutes into a unique pattern. Some of them have the feeling, well, we're sharing too much with that level that's in that meeting, right? We have to hold that close to the chest. That's an actual meeting. That's not a stand-up. There should be nothing in an organization about what you're trying to achieve that should be hidden from those doing the tasks for you. The things that you discuss in the daily stand-up shouldn't be secret to an organization. So sometimes the management that I bump into, those are the two biggest things. I don't have time, or I don't want to share that much about what we do. And they're hard to get past. There's no tool that gets you past that. And we discussed that with a lot of organizations. If you want to be lean, you have to accept lean. I know I put this in a post, and it might be in poor humor, hopefully not, but it's like an AA meeting. First thing is recognizing you have a problem. Second is acknowledging that you need help with the problem. Process improvement is no different. If leadership of the organization doesn't acknowledge that they need a new structure and that they're willing to accept a new structure, it doesn't matter how experienced I am. I won't get them there. They're the ones that have to run the organization. But what I tell most of them is, once you see the benefit of what it produces, especially something like the daily stand-up, all of a sudden you don't know how to operate without it. It becomes your flow of information that allows you to continue to do, dig in for the rest of the day. High-level overview. You spend the rest of the day digging in.
Love it. Love it. Oh, so helpful. And, magically our time is up. It always flies when I'm listening to your brilliance. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have, and, or that you want to leave people with when it comes to this kind of stuff?
That's such a long list. Maybe not anything that we didn't ask that doesn't spawn us off into a whole other conversation, but one thing that I'll go back to the beginning, listening to the team. I cannot express how important listening to the team is. And that doesn't mean just for the daily stand-up. That means for every aspect of what you do. And you just listen to the team with letting the team make the decisions. Again, I run into that a lot. And they're like, well, why don't I just let, the employees run the business then? That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is listen to your team's input, because they are the ones that are creating your value. Unless you are physically in front of a member, as an executive, unless you're in front of somebody writing you a check for your business, you're not being value added. The employee that's standing in front of the machine that's producing your widget, that's your value added person. And if you're not listening to them, you're losing value.
Oof. As Kurt Anderson would say, that was a mic drop moment right there. Oh my God, I love that. What a great way to end. Thank you so much. As I said before, thank you for your service. It means a lot. And just thank you for everything that you do every day. I don't know that you get thanked enough.
I do. I just like helping. I love working with anybody that's willing to listen to me, help them work through their problems.
Well, you are the man to help. And so anybody listening, everybody listening, if you're not already connected with Phil Ranck on LinkedIn, please do that. He is a wealth of information. He is a stand-up guy, and is just never ceases to blow my mind with, better ways to do things. And you're so good at breaking it down and in, bite-sized chunks and making it understandable. And If you listening are not already subscribed to this podcast, please do that. And leave a review on Apple. It just lets other people know that this is worth tuning into. And I always say we're better together. So thank you for what you do every day as a manufacturer. We need you. So until next time, everybody.
Thanks so much for having me.
If you're not already, subscribe to the Manufacturing Masters podcast on Apple Music or Spotify. And for a deeper dive, head on over to manufacturing-masters.com. It's everything they never taught you in school.